Indy?
Thanks, Diane. Welcome, everyone. It's good to see you here. Just to give you a little brief synopsis of what we do with the Boone County Workforce Alliance. We're committed to connecting our Boone County businesses with resources and initiatives to strengthen our local workforce. And through this alliance, we have a group of business, school, and government leaders who come together bi-monthly that are actively working together to address our workforce challenges. So we have two committees that we've broken out. One is focusing on education and training, and the other is focusing more on a marketing initiative. So hopefully by at least the fall or early next year, we'll have some more concrete programming in place once we get through this time of the pandemic. But thanks for all of our Workforce Alliance members that are on the call today. We appreciate your input on this really important discussion that we're going to have. So I would like to now introduce our featured speaker. Toni Neely is with the Indy Chamber, and she is also a professional development speaker and trainer. So welcome, Toni, and we're going to turn it over to you.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you very much for having me. Thank you, Diane, Amy, Lexi, and thank you all for joining today. It is truly an honor to be with you. Just to give you a little bit of background about me, I grew up in Mishawaka, Indiana, graduated from Penn High School a day or two ago, a moment or two ago. Also went to IU, graduated from there with a history degree. And what else does one do with a history degree? You get a job selling liquor and wine. So I did that for 15 years. It was glorious. I had an amazing experience. Started at the very bottom as a sales trainee, worked my way up, became the first female general sales manager the company had. I was in charge of the northern third of the state, and then got promoted again and came down to Indianapolis in 1999, and I became the Bacardi brand manager and Sky Vodka brand manager. I was very popular with lots of people in those days. But from there, I got promoted again and became the statewide recruiter and trainer for the company. And that's what sparked my love for learning and development. I always thought I was going to be a teacher. I always thought I was going to teach history and coach sports. And as it turns out, I'm on this other path where I get to be in a learning environment with adults, and I love every single minute of it. So I got certified as a diversity and inclusion trainer back in 2008, and I've been doing it ever since. I love the work. It's meaningful, it's important, it's certainly relevant, and we're going to jump right in, okay? So let's talk about what today's going to look like. We're going to we'll go through some definitions. We'll talk about some demographic trends. We're going to look at a couple models so you can see how differences can and sometimes do create barriers in the workplace and how that might play out. So we're going to be examining that as well. I invite you to jot down your questions along the way. We'll leave time at the end so you can ask those. And it always helps if you jot them down along the way, because if you try to remember, you may forget. So please do that. And I would also invite you to stay till the end. I have a number of actionable items for you so you can get started today. Okay? All right, so let's jump in. So today we are going to define diversity and inclusion and other key terms. I mentioned that to help with the awareness and the understanding of how differences can and sometimes do create barriers in the workplace. And certainly our job as leaders, as supervisors, as direct reports, we want to reduce the barriers that prevent others from making their maximum contribution. That's the goal. There might be a barrier with another individual. It might be a process. It might be something else. But we want to reduce those so everyone is making their maximum contribution. And we also want to understand the importance of building your inclusive competence, your inclusive culture competence muscle. It's hard to spit that one out, to increase your revenue and also your engagement. And we all know diversity and inclusion is certainly a business imperative. So some key terms for us, just to get us familiar. Affirmative action, you might have heard that word in the past, concept to increase representation. That was not about quotas, that was about equal representation. Diversity, noun which describes demographics. Inclusion, a verb which speaks to proactive behaviors. Cultural competencies, these are the skills required to create inclusion and leverage differences, okay? And engagement, then of course, we know when our workforce is engaged, it increases both productivity and the bottom line. So let's go through some key definitions. Prejudice, preconceived opinion that is not based on reason or actual experience. Discrimination, the unjust treatment of different categories of people or things, especially based on the grounds of race, gender, ethnicity, religion, disabilities, education, military experience, thinking style, sexual orientation, the list goes on, and we'll be taking a closer look at that as we move through the presentation today. But in short, you know, prejudice is the opinion or the belief. Discrimination is the action, right? So you have a right to believe what you want to believe. You have a right to believe what you want to believe, but we have a responsibility in the workplace to manage our behavior. Unconscious, the part of the mind which is inaccessible to the conscious mind, but which affects behavior and emotions. Bias, prejudice in favor of or against one thing, person, or group compared with another, usually in a way considered to be unfair. You hear a lot of talk about unconscious bias. I'm going to talk about that here in just a little bit too. Okay, so what is diversity? It is the acknowledgement of all human differences. It is that simple, and there are many. Sometimes it also helps to define what diversity is not. So diversity is not holding hands and singing Kumbaya, and it's not about changing your beliefs. As I stated earlier, you have every right to believe what you want to believe, but we do have to manage our behavior in the workplace. So I don't know if any of you have done this work before, and if you have, you might have heard of this study called the 7-11 rule, the 7-11 rule. And that is, some years ago, New York University did a study and concluded that within 7 seconds of meeting someone new, you will make 11 judgments about that person. That's how fast our minds work. And so when you think about anybody that you meet, and maybe in a networking situation or whatever the case may be, right now, your mind starts saying, oh, you know, you're making notices. So I like to popcorn different words too, because judgment kind of sounds kind of harsh, but it's really notices, judgments, observations. So think about when you meet somebody, I'll use myself as an example. I reach out, of course, right? I shake your hand. I'm noticing how firm your handshake is. I'm noticing your glasses, your shirt, how lovely your hair is, whatever. And I'm going boom, 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 boom. And so are you. And so take note of that as you're meeting people. Just start becoming aware. You know, this is what this work is all about, awareness, so we can manage our behavior. But it goes deeper than that though too. And I have a full list of what they concluded, what the results were. And the 7-11 rule, what are the 11 decisions that people are making or observations? Education level, economic level, perceived credibility, believability, competence, and honesty. And these are happening in 11 seconds. So just think about this. Trustworthiness, level of sophistication, sex role identification, level of success, political background, religious background, ethnic background, and social, professional, and sexual desirability. All those are happening in that short amount of time. So that's why one thing we talk about, I work for the Indy Chamber as mentioned, we're here with the chamber event, but we're talking about those first impressions. That's why it really matters, because our minds are working so fast and we're trying to sum each other up so quickly. So it makes it matters. Your handshake matters, your eye contact matters, how you appear matters, your tonality, all those things. But let's go back into the workplace now. And we do a lot of work with this very model. And I'll be happy to share this with you if you want to get a hold of Diane and Lexi and Amy after this. This is a really great team building exercise and a really great place to start a conversation. But what we do, if we were live and if we had time, we would be exploring this and taking time to get to know each other using this model. So let me just kind of walk you through real fast. You see on the outside circle, we have organizational differences. So things like seniority, title, work location, management status. If you go into the middle circle, you'll see personal cultural differences listed. Things like education, income, nationality, work background, parental status, military experience. All right, and then you go into the center circle and we have biological differences. You see them there: thinking style, age, race, physical abilities, gender, personality, sexual orientation, and ethnicity. And so the two questions, so the exercise is this, and you can do this with your folks at your respective places, but we would invite people at this time to pick 4 from anywhere on the model. Pick 4 that best define who you are. Any 4, doesn't matter where. Pick 4 that best define who you are, and then write a quick sentence as to why that one matters. Why did you pick that one? What is it? Why is it that you want someone to know that story about you? And so I'll give you an example. One of mine is I pick education. I pick education for a couple of reasons. One is my folks were divorced when I was 10 years old, as back in 1975. Don't do the math, don't do the math. And that's when, you know, women weren't even, you know, they were just entering the workforce. My dad drank a lot, and so with his disease, he was not available. He didn't come for visitation. He wasn't paying child support. So my mom raised 3 kids on her own and sent my sister and myself to school. We both graduated from IU. Now, mind you, I worked all through school too. It was a total team effort. But I wouldn't be where I am today without my education. And it's kind of a 2-prong success story. It's a family triumph story for us, for me, and it's very personal for me. And it's not something that I have an opportunity to share at the workplace. You know, when you show up at work, we put our heads down and we start working and we do our thing and we work together and we collaborate and we integrate the best we can and we handle conflict the best we can and all this stuff. But rarely do we take time to share, you know, what's important to us. And so this is a really great exercise. If you have folks, pick 4, and we call it get one, share one then, so they can either sit around the table and everyone take a turn, or you can have people stand up if you have a big room and you want them to move around and maybe interact with other business units that they don't normally get to interact with. I highly, highly, highly recommend doing this exercise. So, and for your information, if you're gonna be the facilitator, the 2 questions I get most are in the biological circle. You know, what's significant about the biological circle? First of all, it's that if those differences are prevalent, which they are, of course, but these are they're either impossible to change or very hard to change, right? And so the 2 questions I get are, what do you mean by thinking style? And then some folks will question why sexual orientation is in the biological. So first, thinking style. When you think thinking style, think about, are you a person that, are you a visionary person? You know, are you up here? You've got the vision, you've got the strategy, you're leading the charge. You're not paying a lot of attention to the details. Or are you that person who does pay attention to the details? You're down here in the weeds, you're the soldier, you're the implementer, you're the let's march, let's go, because we know all types are important, right? You might be more linear, whatever the case may be. Just think about your thinking style, and also include that one when you invite your folks to share, pick 4, have them make one of those thinking style, because I'll get back to that in a second. Let me just address sexual orientation real quick. So sexual orientation, again, like I said, you have a right to believe what you want to believe. We have a responsibility to manage our behavior. So if you have a belief that sexual orientation is not biological, then just mentally pluck it out of the biological circle and mentally pluck it into the personal cultural circle, okay? But back to thinking style. So here's another quick example. Well, let me go to the next slide. I get ahead of myself sometimes. I get so excited about this. So after you do this, after you do the exercise and everybody has shared, you'll notice, you'll find that diversity isn't them, right? Diversity is us. We have so many differences and similarities, and you're going to find those too, which is great. That's the other great thing about this exercise. Then, I have a chance to hear how you define you, not how I define you, right? I've already 7-Eleven'd you and did my thing and made my quick decisions and all that, but how do you define you? And how much more effectively and efficiently can we work together when I know that about you? Very, very valuable. Another great outcome of this exercise is this thing called intent versus impact. And so have you ever, I have done it plenty of times, unfortunately, have you ever like cracked a joke, told a joke, or just tried to be funny about something, or share something that you thought was just pretty innocent, but it had a negative impact on somebody else? I've done it. I hate it, right? It's the last thing I want to do ever is negatively impact somebody. But if you do this exercise and you find out what's important to people, then you can minimize those instances. So for example, when I worked for a diversity and inclusion company, we used that model as the onboarding tool. And so when they onboarded me to the company, the owner and all the other employees, we all sat around the circle and we did this exercise. And the owner shared that she's a widow now, and her partner and husband passed away of cancer. And she shared with us, do you know when people use that word, I'm a golf widow this weekend, or I'm a bowling widow, or I'm a softball widow, or, it's just, I've used it myself, right? I mean, it seems to be innocent enough. But when she shared that and she said how that impacted her, she said, it's like I get punched in the gut every time somebody says that. Of course, they don't know that because they wouldn't know that about her life necessarily. But when she shared that with us, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm of course not going to make that kind of comment in front of my boss because I know how that makes her feel, right? So I can avoid that. Now, did I stop saying that phrase altogether? No, I didn't stop saying that phrase altogether, but did I stop saying it in front of her? Of course I did. Of course I did. Okay. So that's the value of doing this exercise too. Here's another one. If you've ever said or have ever heard it said to you, not a team player or not the right fit, what does that mean exactly, right? So when I was working for the liquor company, I was in a supervisor position at the time. I had 7 team members, and there was an opening in Indianapolis. We were in South Bend still. Hey, Toni, what about Terry? What about, he seems to be doing a great job. And I was like, I don't know. I don't know if he's a team player. And that's all I had to say. I'd be like, I just don't get that he's a team player. And I'd just kind of do this. And then everybody would sit back and they're around the table and they'd just be like, yeah, not a team player. Okay, fine. Terry doesn't get to go. I mean, that's all we had to say. And I hadn't done my work yet. So let me just say that was a real life situation. That was my experience of this person. But now when I reflect back and I have learned to look at differences differently, could it have been that he just had a different thinking style? That's why I want you to include thinking style, because if I've decided, if my perception is that you're not a team player, there's something going on behaviorally for me to make that assessment, right? And so in this case, every time I needed to implement something came from the top down, or a survey was coming and we had to hit the market, whatever the case would be, whatever it was, he would be like, so have you thought about it like this? Or I'm not sure that's going to work because we did that before. Have you tried this before? Like every single time it felt like my experience of it was pushback, right? It's pushing back all the time. It's like, oh gosh, I'm going to have to, implement something new again. And I know when I kick it off with the team, I know who's going to speak up and I know who's going to be pushing back. That's my experience. Now I know, having done my work, and it never ends, by the way, I know that he had a different thinking style than I did. That's just how his mind worked. But I decided something else about him and probably stopped him from ever moving forward in the organization. So it's on us to consider what we're experiencing and look at it differently, consider it differently, okay? Because we may not, what our perception is, may not be on the mark all the time, right? So as I mentioned, this is a great team building exercise. Please do include the thinking style, because I think it really will help you and your team as you move through things together, as you continue to work together. And this is my favorite quote from Dr. Wayne Dyer. If you're familiar with him, he's a speaker. He's all about power of intention and all that. He passed away a couple years ago, but when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. It is so true. So I'll leave you with that, with this exercise. We can talk about this at the end if you'd like, if you have any questions about it. Okay, so here's one that we're not going to have time to do today, but it's very important to include. If you are going to seek diversity and inclusion training after you leave this webinar today, whatever trainer you decide to work with, I would invite you to ask for an unconscious bias awareness exercise. It is eye-opening, it is impactful, and what it does is it helps us own our biases, okay? So just to give you a kind of a flavor of what this exercise is, in a classroom setting, you would be in table teams, and I would be asking you, you'll do individual work, but I'd be asking you to list, it's a timed exercise, you do it by yourself, and I would be asking you to use a single word or short phrase and list everything you've ever heard, felt, or believed, both positive and negative, about blank. And we'll do that 7 times with 7 different groups, and you can see your own data and you'll see the positives and the negatives that come up, and you'll be like, oh my gosh, how is that sitting right here? When they just introduced this exercise to me, and it came from my brain past my hand onto the pen. That's the power of this exercise. So I love doing experiential exercises because it really helps with the kinesthetic learning, which is so important, such an important piece of all of this. But it really helps you notice, be aware of, and then of course the goal is to own your biases, okay? It'll also show you how we sometimes individualize the positives and generalize the negatives. So maybe I have some negative things in the in one of the columns, and then I'll be like, oh, but not my brother, you know, he's such a good guy. Not my uncle, not my brother, but it's those others. It's those others over there. That's where the negative, that's where those negative words are applied to. It's just over there, not right here, okay? Which is just another incredible notice on how this works and how our minds work. This thing called cognitive dissonance. This is another thing that kind of perpetuates us not owning our biases. So let me give you an example of what this is. Cognitive dissonance is opposing views. Your mind can't hold opposing views simultaneously. So I have biases and prejudices. I'm a good person, right? They're conflicted in there. And so what happens? Well, of course I'm a good person, right? And so I'm going to tuck these biases and these prejudices, I'm going to sweep those under the table because I'm a good person, darn it, you know? And good people don't have biases and prejudices. But the fact of the matter is, none of us escape that. We all have biases. We all do have prejudices. So the best we can do is be aware of them and then own them, because you can't manage what you're not aware of, right? That's why they call it awareness training. You can't manage what you're not aware of. And then we certainly can't move forward unless we own our own stuff. Very, very important. You'll also notice that the labels will change, but the dynamics stay the same. So I can give you like a list of 7 different groups that we'd work with, but then I can change all the labels too, and I can say, okay, tell me everything you've ever heard, felt, and believed, both positive and negative, about the firstborn, middle child, baby of the family. List, 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 list. Tell me everything you've ever heard, felt, and believed, both positive and negative, about Democrats, Republicans, independents. List, 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 list. So again, this is noticing how the mind works. This is not about your heart. This exercise is noticing what's in the mind and what sticks in the mind. You know, we've got like little computers up there, and we've got little files up there. And the stuff that we heard when we were young, from a variety of different sources, parents, grandparents, neighbors, media, church, school, you list it. We've heard the messages, and we've heard messages about ourselves, right? I'm very well aware of the stereotypes and the biases around women, just as much as I am any other group. So that's what we need to become aware of, more aware of, and own, so we can manage those things, be aware of them, so they don't transfer into discrimination in the workplace. Then the other interesting thing is, well, like, why don't we write about the people we know? So I'll list even those lists I just gave you just now. You'll notice that you'll have positives and negatives on there, but it's just so interesting that this exercise will kind of catch you off guard and be like, well, you know, why didn't I write about so-and-so, my family member, or my aunt, or my uncle, or my mom, or my dad? Like, why weren't they present when I was doing this exercise? It is really, really, really eye-opening. If you've ever said this might be an indicator that you have a hidden bias. I don't even see you as a woman. I don't, you know, you're just one of the guys, right? Or I don't even see you as Black. You're just one of us. I don't even see you as white. I don't even see you as Hispanic. I don't even see you, whatever you fill in the blank with, that is an indicator of a hidden bias, okay? I don't even see you as this list that I have over here. That's what that's indicating. And a quick example, back when I was with the liquor company, when I had been promoted to the statewide recruiter and trainer, I was the pass-through, since I had come up through, I started at the very bottom as a sales trainee, right? So, and I had a wonderful career, but since I had that position, they were trusting me to do the first interview, to recruit and do the first interview, and then pass that person on to the hiring manager as it related to sales. The chain division represented a group that's dedicated to the big box stores, you know, Costco and Sam's Club and CVS and every place that buys in giant quantities and has a warehouse. It's very physically demanding, and it's long hours, some weekends, especially on the holidays. And so now that's one of the divisions I had to hire for. There were other ones too. But in this case, one day I walked into a meeting that they were having just to go check, and I still can see it. I walked in the room, and there were 25 young white men, ages 22 to probably 28. And I was like, oh my gosh. I mean, and when I say, oh my gosh, I mean, it hit me then, but not as much as it hit me when I did my work a couple of years later with diversity and inclusion, and looked back and I was like, oh my gosh, look at that hidden bias. What did I believe that was required of that job? And I left so many capable, talented people out of the mix. Anybody of color, women, go on and on. I mean, you know, I can't believe it. So while I was doing my best with what I knew, I just didn't realize that I had a hidden bias here. And so I offer that true story to give you a real life example, and also maybe just open up the possibility of why this work is so very important, or even a bigger possibility, I should say. Okay, so we're going to move on, and I'm going to watch my time. Oh my gosh, 11:34. Okay, social distance model. Social distance is all about the degree to which you're willing to be close to, associate with those that are different than you are, right? So if you have an unwillingness to live next door to a family of a different race, that would indicate a very high degree of social distance. On the other hand, if you have a willingness to marry someone of a different race, you have a very low degree of social distance. Okay, so this is another really, really impactful and great model for you to kind of walk through and perhaps even use if you need it, and I'll be happy to share it. But the company that I worked for when I was trained as a diversity and inclusion trainer, Procter & Gamble in Cincinnati hired them to come in and figure out why they were making, so this is back in 1976, okay, and the company was just forming, and they got hired by Procter & Gamble. The situation was they were making efforts to hire Black males and some females at the time, and they had a revolving door. You know, they would be in there for a month or less, and they couldn't figure out what the problem was. So they hired the consulting firm to come in, the firm for whom I worked. And this is what they discovered, and this still plays out today. So what we know is that as perceived differences among people increase, so too do the barriers to inclusion. And so what happens is you have the folks that are in the norm, and they have less experience interacting with those out of the norm. They have fewer skills interacting with those out of the norm, and they have lower motivation to include others, right? So if you're in the norm group, you're like, it's great here. I love it here. It's easy. It's great. You know, people support each other. We're learning. We're growing. We're producing. It's wonderful. But if you're out of the norm, you have less experience interacting with those in the norm. You have fewer skills interacting with those in the norm, and you have a lower motivation to include self, right? So now you have two groups of people who don't know how to take that step in, right? One side's like, I'm not really motivated to really go out of my way here because life's pretty good. And the other group saying, you know, I don't know how to include myself. Of course, then that affects the quality of the work relationships, which goes down, decreases. And this I'm going to come back to in a second because this is the most important piece of this whole model. The informal development, the task effectiveness, and the resource utilization all down, 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 down. And of course, what does that do? That decreases employee development and organizational productivity. So let me go back up just for a second for that informal development. This is, you know, our success rides on informal development. I don't know about you, every single job I've had, nobody's really handed me the full book on how to be successful here. More times than not, it's you get a couple things, you get a computer, you get the general idea of what it is you're tasked to do, and then it's like, go be successful, right? And so you've got to figure it out. But you can't do it all by yourself. Or if you do, it's going to take a longer amount of time, and that could work against you as your supervisors are watching, right? So the informal development is all about feedback and shared information. So when I'm comfortable with you, my feedback will be quick, balanced, and specific, right? Do this, don't do that, correct this, good job here, keep doing more of that, you need to tweak this, da, da, da. When I'm comfortable with you, I'm going to be in that relationship. I'm going to share information. I'm going to give you the feedback that's impactful, right? And it's timely. We can't wait for it, right? So if I'm uncomfortable with you, I might rely on the clump and dump, right? So then you've got two scenarios here. One, the feedback's quick, balanced, and specific. And the other one is I'm waiting 90 days, I'm writing all my notes. And then at the 90-day review, I'm going to sit you down and say, listen, these are the 10 things that you haven't done. And I'm sorry, you're just not going to work out here. It turns out that you're not the right fit. And the person sitting there going, you know, if you would have told me that along the way, I could have made the necessary changes, right? But this is a dynamic that can play out if there's some level of discomfort for whatever reason. The other thing is about sharing information versus instruction, right? So a new employee is going to have, give me the percentage of how much more success you're going to have when somebody shares information versus relies on instruction, right? So when you're sharing information, you're taking that person under your wing. You're like, listen, the boss likes it when you're 15 minutes early. Also likes it when you stay 10 or 15 minutes after 5. You know, if you're one of those people that darts out right at 5 till, you think that he or she's not watching, he or she is, right? And you're getting all that good information that's going to help you be more successful. But if somebody's not comfortable with you and they're not sharing those ins and outs, and you're just getting the instruction, right? This is an 8 to 5 job. Get it done. And good luck. We're here if you need anything. You know, be sure to ask questions as you need to. I'm here to help. But you know, there's a complete difference, and there's a completely different impact on that person's development. Task effectiveness refers to how effective is this person with the task at hand, right? And so, if you've ever heard the term protective hesitation, that could be playing out for someone who's not comfortable asking questions. So let me give you an example. When I was promoted at the liquor company and I became the first female brand manager, I was the first female in the entire row of 10 men, all doing now profitability management, right? We're watching the books, we're watching the bottom line. Now this is new to me. Number one, I'm a history major. But I wanted to learn and grow, and I got the position, but nobody was training me. And so instead of me asking questions, because I had my list of probably what all the stereotypes were, a woman doesn't belong in this row, and not qualified, and not smart enough, and all these things. So all those things are running in my head. And so what did I do? Instead of ask questions, I was protective. I was hesitating and protecting myself. And I would stay after work. I did it for 3 months. I stayed till like 8 or 9 o'clock every night studying the formulas and study. I mean, I just worked my tail off, and all of that could have been avoided if I would have had the comfort and the courage and the confidence to ask the questions I needed to ask to be successful in my job. And so I ask you, you know, is there somebody who's afraid to ask the questions that they need to be successful at your workplace? Or maybe you're one of them, but we've got to find the courage to ask, and we've got to find the courage to probe, because people are holding themselves back who are very, very capable and very, very smart and can give you better outcomes. And then resource utilization, of course, this is, you know, are you using the same person over and over again? Are you giving everybody on the team equal opportunity to shine? If you just keep going to your 1 or 2, I know that I can count on these 2. Others are not able to show you what they can do, and now they're stuck in a position when maybe they are quite capable, but just haven't had the chance to show you their stuff, okay? But that's right here. This is what I call looking under the hood, and we got to take the time to do that, because too quickly we rely on our perception, and we don't do the digging and get the facts that we need, you know? Was the informal development there? Before we decide we had a, you know, we call them the good hire and the bad hire, or a dud, or whatever it is that we say. You know, we hired 2 people at the same time, and one person's like this, right, skyrocketing, and the other person's like this, and we're like, what do we do? We rely on our perception. Great hire, go get her. That's that, you know, yay for us. And like, well, this one, you know, kind of flatline. You know, we didn't do a very good job screening this person, so this person's going to have to go. Well, maybe not. Maybe all of this in that row right there, informal development, task effectiveness, and resource utilization, maybe that person hasn't been given a chance. So you've got to talk to the supervisor. You've got to be aware of that person's abilities to develop people. You've just got to dig a little deeper, okay? And so please, I would just ask you to look at those things, look at your organization, and how supportive, how is this playing out in your organization? What can you do to make those things better? Because it does make all the difference for the individual. Right now, I'd stop and ask questions, but we can't. We'll get to the end, and then we'll answer questions then. But really, another takeaway from this exercise, you know, you have to be intentional about including people. Because if you don't intentionally include, you will unintentionally exclude. I'm going to say that again. If you don't intentionally include, you will unintentionally exclude. And you know what? All we want to do is belong in our organization, right? I want to know my voice matters. I want to know that my ideas matter. I want to feel included, that I belong there. I'm contributing. And so if you're just sitting back, and I'll bet you if you go back to your organization, you might be able to spot a person or two who's always seems to just kind of keep to themselves, or are left out and aren't included with group things. And you know how people will get together, maybe go have a coffee or go have lunch, and the one person in the department's left out. You know, invite that person to join you, or invite that person to a coffee and go get to know him or her. It's the belonging piece. You know, this isn't new news, right? You remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Belonging's right in the middle. Whether you start from the top and come down, or you start at the bottom and go up, we all need a sense of belonging. It's one of the most important things we can experience at the workplace, along with our, you know, our value and our contribution. Leaders must cultivate the skill set as they do other skill sets, such as effective communication, influencing, vision casting, team building, professional development, exceeding goals. Inclusive leaders not only embrace value and provide a sense of belonging, they are skilled at leveraging differences as a competitive advantage. That's the other thing, as you're developing as a leader and you're noticing the differences, get to know what those drivers are and put folks in the lanes where they're going to make the most impact, okay? We've got to leverage differences instead of judging people for them and dismissing them because I've got a perceived notion of how you think, right? The thinking style. Leaders who create an inclusive culture see performance enhanced by 17%, decision-making quality by 20%, and collaboration enhanced by 29%. Inclusion, proactive behaviors that make others feel valued and respected. Okay, you've got to be intentional about it. You've got to be proactive in this area. It doesn't just happen. And here's something you can do right now. You can go back and ask this question to anyone on your team. Is there anything you're experiencing that I'm unaware of that is preventing you from making your maximum contribution here? If you don't ask, you assume, and making assumptions is not the most solid platforms on which to stand. I'm also guilty of this. Senior leaders in Indianapolis when I was still in South Bend. Well, how's everything going, Toni? How's your team? Hey, team's great. Team's great. Haven't heard anything. So no news is good news, right? You know what? That was my naivete, of course. I hadn't done my work yet. But you know, there are all kinds of things that different people can run into in the workplace. Let me ask you this. Is it possible for somebody who is 6'5" to have a different experience in the workplace than somebody who is 5'6"? Of course. Is it possible for somebody who has English as a first language to have a different experience in the same workplace as someone who has English as a second language? Yes, of course, right? And the list goes on and on. And so even though we're sharing this common space, we're all having different experiences within that space. We can't assume that everybody's having the same experience that I'm having. And so you've got to ask the question. You've got to make the time, okay? There it is. But I don't have time because we're all very busy, and I get that. But if you don't ask, the inconvenience of making the time can turn into conflict, and conflict can turn into crisis, and crisis can turn into many, many dollars spent if something goes really awry and now you're in a court setting, then you're losing time and money, okay? A lot of things can be avoided if we proactively ask questions up front and make the time to hear from our coworkers. Here are some stats for you, and I'm going to look at the time. Oh my gosh, look at, we're like at 10 till. So I need to
Toni, we need to kind of wrap it up so we can have time for Q&A and discussion.
And we have some good questions, so we want to make sure we have.
So sorry about that. I'm sorry about that.
Hey.
I knew it was going to happen.
And this will be recorded, and if you want to send the PowerPoint for everyone,
Sure.
you know, we can do that to the attendees.
Sure.
So.
Do you want me to hit the stop share button?
Sure. Is there one last thing that you think it's imperative from your presentation that you touch on very briefly before we get to questions?
No, I would just say, you know, it's important to do this work, and no matter who you hire, make sure they have a lot of experience in this area, and but make the time and make the investment, because what it really does is it kind of level sets everyone. It gives everyone common language, and it helps everyone step into getting to know each other better, so you can work better and more efficiently and effectively together. So this would be one, but maybe you do DISC, or maybe you do Strengths Finder, or anything that brings you together, that sets a new bar, common language, so we can get to know each other better, will definitely positively impact your work environment. So I'll leave it there.
Yeah, and I know when you, Amy, and I spoke, and Lexi, this week too, you know, the importance of communicating, and which you touched on, and asking questions, you know, with the team. And I know in our discussions during Workforce Alliance, and when we talk to businesses, when we first started Workforce Alliance, you know, what are their needs and how can we connect them with resources to help those needs? And a couple of the questions, and that came through privately to chat, but I remember people asking this in a Workforce Alliance meeting was, you know, our businesses want to hire people who represent visible and invisible differences. But often, rarely, those individuals are applying for job openings at you know, their company. They want to know what they can do to attract a more diverse population. And with that being said, there was another question, you know, came in that I think you can piggyback on that. When they have hired, you know, diverse individuals, they aren't staying long. So that retention isn't very long. So do you have tips on how to, one, attract, and two, retain those employees that represent a more diverse population? So really, how do they build a diverse workforce?
Yeah, wow, yeah, great question. So we have to understand that it's not business as usual, and so we can't simply rely on job boards. We can't post on ZipRecruiter and Glassdoor and Indeed and sit back and wait for talent to find us, and especially diverse talent. And so you really need to get intentional about casting a wider net on how you reach different groups, especially from a diversity standpoint. And so you might do things like go to job fairs that you don't normally go to, go to colleges that you don't normally attend and go to their job fairs. You might join other groups like the Black Chamber, the Asian Alliance, the Rainbow Chamber. Get involved with different groups that are already meeting and interacting and already are organized, and use their job boards. A lot of, as I've been talking to employers about this over the last couple of years, talent attraction is #1 on everybody's list. We've got to even go further and go deeper, and there are a number of industries and companies in particular that are now going to high schools and junior high schools to introduce their industry to a diverse population. That's been, they've been getting some really good traction there as well. But a lot of times, non-white people need to see themselves in the organization. So the more we can, because I don't even know it exists a lot of the times too, like, oh, I never even thought about myself as a financial planner, or no one's even really talked to me about finances in my family, you know, and all of a sudden we've got Charles Schwab or a number of different wonderful institutions that are going into talk to students at the 7th and 8th grade level. That's really when kids start thinking about what is my path? What is available to me? How might I see myself? So that would be a good place to start. Then I can offer more, but I'm going to stop there. And then from the retention side, of course, it's just like I said there at the end, it's that feeling of belonging. you know, what is your onboarding process? So beyond recruiting, so now recruiting, we know we've got to cast a wider net and we got to get on different types of job boards. You might even go to churches and get on their job boards. I mean, you just got to think way out of the box and get into action. You got to be intentional about it. You can't sit back and wait. From from retaining people, it's going to be the same thing. How well are you setting them up for success? How do they feel included right out of the gate? And are you giving them the support they need? I'll tell you, most of us can probably agree to this. We know within 2 to 3 weeks of starting a new job, if we can sense, we can feel, we can tell by the behaviors of what's being presented to me and who's supporting me if I'm going to be successful there. So look at your onboarding process. Look at succession planning. Does this person have a growth path? All of these things need to be in place too. And then of course, offer, you know, giving them the support that they need from the resource standpoint as well. But usually it's that belonging piece and how am I experiencing myself belonging here can make a huge, you know, you can make that difference when somebody starts.
So Toni, I had another question come through the chat box. They're asking for companies that have a limited budget and may not be doing a robust diversity and inclusion training program at this time. What are things that they can do that can make a really strong impact that doesn't cost a lot of money?
Oh, that's a great question too. So, you know, a couple of the things are on in this presentation, which I'm happy to share. I can send you like that. I think a great place to start would be that social distance model with the 3 circles, the organizational differences, personal cultural differences, and biological differences, and just take that to your team. So you might, so I know we have a diverse group of people here. You could be anywhere in the structure of the organization. You might be the senior leader. You might have just started 2 weeks ago, and anyone in between. But if you want to start building a more inclusive culture, you can start with that model and have folks around you, invite them in. If you're the only one in your business unit, then invite a couple others and just tell them about what you've experienced and invite them to do that exercise with you, because you just want to get to know people better so you can create a better working experience. We can work more effectively and efficiently with each other. So just using that model, going to other webinars like this and bringing it back to the workplace. There are things that you can do, and there are things, and your beingness can make a difference too. So be that inclusive person. You know, if somebody new has started and they're in a different department, or even if they're in your own, invite them to a coffee. Be the gracious host, right? Give them the ins and outs. Share the information that's going to help them move forward. Hey, you want to get here at 1:45 when, you know, because this really matters, et cetera, et cetera. So I'll stop there in case you have another question.
Hi, Toni. Rachel, thank you so much for the presentation. Greatly appreciate it. One question that I have is, with all of the current events going on in our country, as well as in the state of Indiana, what's one piece of advice or several pieces of advice you have when you are talking to a person who is different than you about these areas and the current events specifically?
Oh, that's a great question. So, I would say, come from your heart and talk to the person genuinely, like you genuinely want to learn something. I genuinely care, and I was wondering if you would be comfortable sharing your experience with me. And then also commit to confidentiality. Say, listen, this isn't going to go anywhere. I just want to know and understand. I want to be better. I'm trying to grow. And also, everyone should adopt a lot of grace right now, because we tend to hold back in asking those questions, because like I said before, the last thing I want to do, and I'm sure many of us agree, the last thing I want to do is negatively impact somebody by saying the wrong thing or asking the wrong question. But see, that's what holds us back, right? And so if we can all take that step and step in and just say, listen, I'm trying to learn. And so if I stub my toe here, please forgive me. Please offer me grace, because that's not my intention. I just want to learn and grow and understand. And if you'd be willing to help me, I would really appreciate it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Does anyone else have any other questions or anything that they'd like to share?
And listen, and then listen. When you ask the question, then listen. And don't get defensive and don't try to make excuses. Just listen to that person's experience. I've been calling my my Black friends and just saying, listen, I'm just checking in. How are you doing? There's a lot going on and I love you. And I picked up the phone to tell you that. And then I sit back and my last 4 friends have talked for 20 minutes straight and I just listen. And then we talk about how we can partner up and what we can do in our community and where else can we share these types of conversations. So be a good listener.
If anyone has maybe experience in their organization or business, that they've recently implemented addressing some training or just communications. We know it's been, just as Rachel said, everything that's been on the forefront, whether it's in Indiana or nationally too. I think people, would benefit from hearing some of those stories, how they've addressed maybe some conversations in the workplace.
Hi, Toni. It's Adelpha. Thank you so much for this. Was a wonderful presentation. My question is, from where did you receive your diversity and inclusion training certification?
Oh, so Pope and Associates, and they are based in Cincinnati, and they've trained, they've done work in over half the Fortune 500 companies. They've been awarded many, many times for their work over the years. And they're still alive today, doing great work as they always have.
You're a great example. Now, did you say Hope and Company?
It's Pope, P-O-P-E, Pope and Associates.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
We had a message from Denise Sheff. Denise, if you're still on the call, do you want to talk a little bit about the bias training that you're going to be bringing to the county? She must have left. Denise is with the Boone County court system, and she works with Judge Shine to help our young folks stay on track and helps to support those kids that are going through the system. But she's going to be bringing an implicit bias training to the county. So we'll make sure everyone that's on this call has an opportunity to attend that if you wish. So
great.
So we are at.
Amy, I have a question about the implicit bias. Is it through the Peace Learning Center? I asked because my organization has had a training through the Peace Learning Center. And if not, I'm interested in possibly participating. So are you aware of?
I'm not exactly sure where that training is coming from, but I can find out and let you know for sure.
Thank you.
Well, we are at our hour. We'd like to thank everyone for coming today. As this training, as Diane mentioned, it has been recorded, so you can review it both at the Chambers, on the Chambers YouTube channel, as well as the Boone EDC's YouTube channel. We're also going to be sending out just a brief survey later this week, just to get your thoughts and opinions on what other trainings that you'd like to see coming to the county. So thanks again for joining us, and we appreciate the time that you gave us today, and we hope you all have a great rest of the week. So thanks so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.